welcome back. Recording is in progress. Welcome back. Thank you, Bonnie, once again for setting this up. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I know you're taking time out of your day, and we want to give some real value to you. So last week was really focused on the needs of designers, design agencies, in-house designers, whoever you are. But this week, I want to look at the needs of businesses. So if you're a business owner or a business user or a designer in-house or a designer externally who's supporting businesses, this is for you. But the reality is that the real money in design is often in quite boring things to do with catalogs and data, rather than exciting things like designing the corporate identity, which you just do once, and the Christmas card and things like that. So I want to look at automation, but I know that many people are nervous about automation. They say that to err is human, but to mess things up completely, you need a computer. And that's often been the case, that huge problems have been created by automation. And so content design is something that designers do not want to hand over to the data people, because it could go horribly wrong. Let me just define automation, and this is this. Automation is when you decide once and the computer does it any number of times. So we're not talking about automatic design. We're not talking about the computer taking over your job, but rather the computer picking up the things that you really don't want to be doing again and again, and where it's actually not beneficial for you to do it again and again and again. So let's just look at the advantages of automation and content design. The first one is speed. If you're designing and somebody else is able to put content into your design, then it can go much faster. Secondly, scale. If you design once and it becomes 1,000 similar but different documents, you've dramatically increased the personalization, at the very least, of what you're doing. And that can pay huge dividends for business. And thirdly, accuracy. Every time you copy and paste something in or import something, there is an opportunity for it to go wrong. I was hit with this this week when somebody gave me what they swore had been proofread. And of course, the moment it had gone out, somebody came back and said, do you realize there's a spelling mistake in that? We've all been there. We all hate it. It feels so unprofessional because it's not as bad in other people's documents, but in our documents, it just feels so bad. Automation can help us with that. And it can also extend beyond your competence. So if you've got to work in different languages, I'm here in Brussels, we've got the European Union, 27 countries. Just here in Belgium, we've got 3 different official languages and 3 other unofficial languages. And there's no way that you're going to find anybody who speaks English, French, German, Dutch, Turkish, and Arabic. And yet automation can help you work in those different languages. Also, when it's technical stuff where you really have no competence to tell whether it's this or that, an engineer might be able to look at it and say that's completely wrong, but you can't. And then critical data. I used to work in the health service in the UK. We were doing vast numbers of policies. People's lives depended on those policies being right. And we had a situation once where somebody wanted to copy, they'd done all the policies in Word, and they set a junior employee to copy them all on the Xerox DocuPress. And somehow a policy about, I think, ear syringing began as ear syringing, and then the next page was about taking out stitches after a wound. And you can imagine how dangerous that would be. Fortunately, it was caught before it actually got out. But that taught us that even for text documents, the power of content management can actually save lives. So There's also, though, there's the bits you don't like. There's risk. There is, for example, you do something 1,000 times, and that one mistake is replicated again and again and again. Or the data's bad. Back in the 1970s, my father received one of those very early laser printed mail merged things. It said, "Dear Mr. Gurner, do you and the Gurner family ever think about XYZ? Perhaps the little Gurners," but his name wasn't Gurner, it was Turner. And whatever they were selling, that form letter, and they sent us 3 or 4 letters over a period of a few months, that form letter made sure we were not buying. So risk is there when you automate. There's also complexity. Isn't tangling with data complex? Isn't it difficult? I'm a designer. I don't want to get involved in mathematics. I don't want to get involved in engineering. I don't want to get involved in programming. And then loss of control. And certainly if you've got an automated process which doesn't allow you to fix it afterwards, you have a problem. Back in the 2000s, I was working with a company that delivered our content management system. And they wanted to produce an online product where you could type in, and a doctor or a nurse could type in the text of the brochure, and then it would do a layout and print it out. And that product never succeeded for all kinds of reasons. But one of the reasons was we couldn't assure it was going to be brand compliant, and we couldn't assure it had been proofread, all those other steps. And then finally, you're handing over at least part of a creative process to data processors. Now, they might regard themselves as creative, but to you, a designer, this is giving away control of the corporate image to the very last people you want to give it to. But let me encourage you, you are already doing automation. If you're using QuarkXPress, even the most rudimentary way, and I don't just mean in the sense that Quark is a computer program, so you're automating, you're almost certainly already doing things. Consider this invitation. So on the left, we've got a master page made in QuarkXPress, and it's the text of the invitation with a little logo and the title. And all we've done for this particular thing, and that they wanted 27 different things, is we created a master page. And then we, on the regular pages, we just flowed in a list of names. Paragraph style was defined to start on a new page. And out it came with all of the invitations, which we did as separate PDFs, and they were sent off. I would have done print, but they wanted it done quickly. So I'm not saying what a wonderful, amazing feature of QuarkXPress you've never seen before. You've definitely seen this before. You've definitely used it, but that actually is automation. So the moment you start using master pages, you're already in content design. You've already made design decisions over here, and then you're combining them with content over here. And an awful lot of what we've been doing for years with QuarkXPress is simply about those two things. And the way that Quark works is that all the modules, like the style sheets, the character styles, the item styles, and all those things, they work together. So it's not like Word, where you either use feature A or feature B, but you can't have both at once. Quark allows you to combine these things, and that can become very powerful indeed. And it can become powerful with tools that you already know how to use. Well, another obvious one, which I'm sure you've done at least sometimes, is simple data presentation from Excel into tables. So let's take a table over here. I'm afraid I made this table up as an example. These are all taken from the Lord of the Rings. But on this side, I've got an Excel table, and all that I've done is I've pulled it into QuarkXPress on this side and applied a style to it. I didn't even do any thinking about this, I'm afraid. I just applied a style out of the box. So this becomes this. And you can do many more things to that. However, as you probably know, though you may not be using it, if you've actually told it to link to an external source instead of just pasting it in or importing it one time, then if you now change this, if you change this field here and save, you can go to usage in QuarkXPress, or it will warn you before you try to export or print. And you can then update this, and it will update this, and it will retain all the style sheets, all the formatting that you've done, any custom formatting, it all stays the same. And you've probably used that lots and lots of times, but that's content design as well. But what happens if we go just a little bit further? What happens if we combine content variables, which are in the window panels, like the content variable panel, and you can tell it to look at the date, or you can tell it to look at the file name, or you can tell it to look at custom text you've typed in, or, this is very important, you can tell it to look at the text of the most recent use of a particular style sheet. And that's how you do running headers and running footers. But this can be used much more powerfully when you combine it with data out of Excel. So let's look at using data to drive content. So now, what have I got? Over here, I've got an Excel table which has been pulled in the usual way as live data, and I've just set it to be non-printing. I don't want it appearing in my PDF or my print file, but it does have to be very slightly on the page, otherwise the content variables won't see it. Now, what you can't see is that every single one of these fields, which are different fields in Excel, has got a different paragraph style applied to it. What happens next is that this brochure, which is for a conference I made up, you cannot book into this conference, this brochure now lifts the title and the date and the subtitle and the speakers and the venue and lots of other data out of what is over here. So anything in here, update that table by saving the Excel file, update it in usage, and it will instantly change everything over here, because these things here are content variables which are looking at what's over here. If that sounds complicated, it really isn't. You need to, if you've not used content variables before, they're very simple. You just go in, content variable, new content variable, choose running header or footer, and tell it which paragraph style to look at. And whatever is in that paragraph style on the most recent usage on a page, it will now turn into that content variable. And whenever that appears, just put it in. It will give the word or a sentence. I think it's up to about 256 characters. So you're not going to write your novel on this, but it does do quite a long way. So imagine you're an event management company and you're doing 50 different conferences in 50 states, or 2 each in the countries of the European Union, or maybe in British counties, or wherever you are. And they've all got different dates. They've all got different speakers, because it's difficult to get the speakers at the right places. They've all got different venues, obviously. And they may even have different prices for different reasons. And if you've got to go through 50 different brochures, all of which look exactly the same apart from those particular details, it's a nightmare for you as a designer. The chances that somewhere you're going to copy something incorrectly or someone's going to give you the wrong data are very high. But if you get someone to give you the Excel tables of this, have the content variables do it for you, suddenly we've got the power of content automation in design. But we can go further than this, and we can actually get into full design automation. So back in the 70s, big companies already were getting databases. They'd have big data. Of course, as in the example of my father, they didn't control it very well, and that data control has become a really important thing over the years since. In the 80s and 90s, companies began to use data storage to also do their documents. So imagine you're a product company and you're producing coffee machines. We've got a fantastic coffee machine. It's a Gaggia Velasca Prestige. I'm not quite sure what that means, but what I do know it means is that it makes cappuccino at the press of a button. It's really good. However, the manual is it's that thick, and it's in, I think, 7 or 8 languages. No designer really knows all those languages, but if you use a database to store all that data, not just contact names, but actually the data in the manual, it's very easy to manage. Translators can work with that easily. My wife was a translator for 20 years, did lots of this kinds of things. Translators love to use translation memory systems like Trados. And that works very nicely with the way they work. And then suddenly it can come back to you. So let's look at this. So here's a database which I've constructed in FileMaker Pro. FileMaker Pro, alongside QuarkXPress, has been one of my secret weapons. It's a very easy database to use, but any database will do. Access, or a SQL database, or a NoSQL database. And we've got text here, which you can see where my fingers are going. I'm not a weatherman, so I haven't practiced this. You've got text here, which I want to appear in my document. And it could be that I want every block of that translated by a translator, or simply worked on by a team of different people, all accessing that database. And it could also be that some other text goes alongside it, or some details, some pricing information, which changes all the time. But a database doesn't just store text, it also can manipulate text. And so just in the little corner here, I've just got a little field where it's added some bits of text to the text. And that comes out as this, which is QuarkXPress tags. So this is not the same as X tags, which is an extension which you can still buy, which does all of this, and it's great. But these things are built into QuarkXPress, that the database can be told to put in these little @ and then the name of a paragraph style, and then a colon, and then the text. The result of that, when you pull it into Quark, depending on how you defined it, is this document I've got here. And this is a really simple one. It's just an example I did, where it simply formats it, this is from manual, into clean, crisp, good typography. As far as QuarkXPress is concerned, that is just basic Quark text. There's nothing special about it. Now, to do this, you might think, well, that looks really complicated, all those apps and things. Well, you can go online and download the manual for Express tags, but you don't need to, because all you've got to do is design your first page and include in it all the different style sheets you want to use. And then go to File, Save Text, and you choose as Express tags. And then you give that to your data guys and say, I want my content like this. And they'll look at it. They'll look at the top. There's a little identifier over here, which says what it is. You don't need to know about that. And they'll look at the other stuff in there, and they can then apply that to their database. And so when they give you your text back, it comes straight in like this. And in this way, this is the way we should have done all of our policies when we did them all those years ago. We had QuarkXPress, we just didn't know about this feature then. It's been there since years and years and years. That would have automated all of those policies. They would all have been right. They could have gone straight from the computer to the DocuPress, and they would have come out properly formatted and everything. And this is a simple example, but if you apply to that as well, the image grid feature, which I'm not going to go into this time, I'll talk about that next week because it's a great fun feature. You can even then have all the images appear in the right places, because databases export text. They don't usually export text and images, but they can, if they hold images, export a file, a folder full of images. Quark can just pull those in, put them in the right place, and you have a document. Now, these documents don't design themselves, and we're going to come back to your role as the designer or your role as the business owner in a minute. But just one more fun thing before we do that, because I just want to talk about font programming. So if you're a design agency, then every job is a different job. this probably isn't going to interest you very much. But if you're a business, you probably do what you do and you're pretty good at it. That's how business works. You find a hole in the market, you get good at doing something, you do it at a higher quality and a lower price than anybody else, then you market the heck out of it. Everybody buys it and everybody gets wealthy. So you're going to be doing the same things over and over again. You've got particular icons you want to use. You've got little visuals you want to use. And these can be programmed as fonts. And you can't really do this yourself unless you're a font programmer, which is a whole different thing. But you can find a font designer who for about $700, and I've done this myself, I've commissioned someone to do it, very useful, will design you a font. But not just a font that's got your company's symbols in, very useful, but the fonts can do additional work. So here's a little one which I actually wrote. I'm very proud of this. In my other life, I run a space for guitarists on Quora called Mastering Guitar. It's got 450,000 members, so it's one of the bigger guitar spaces online. But people are trying to share their chord diagrams, and often they're sharing them as these little number strings, 320001. Nobody can look at that and read it, but it's actually not that difficult to create a font, an open type font, which automatically converts that string into that picture. And Quark will then display that, and you can output that very easily. Or in a slightly more complicated version, this string will even give you the fingering positions. Now, unless you're a music business, that particular application won't interest you. That font's available for free for anybody who wants it. Just email me if you want it. No guarantees about functionality, but it does work very well. But this is another font called Chartwell. This is a commercially available font. So if you do a lot of charts, this particular one is a floating circles chart. It's one of the most complicated ones, but it does bar charts, pie charts, area charts, radar charts, lots of different kinds of things. And again, all you do is you type in the numbers and it creates the charts for you. Now, again, you might say, well, that looks really complicated, but actually, if a database is doing it for you, it can visualize that for you very easily. Or here's another one, which I love this. It was only $15. I just couldn't resist buying it. I've never found a use for it, but it was such a nice thing, which is called Clocko. And Clocko it just does a clock. You type in a couple of letters to tell you what look of clock you want, and then the time, and it turns that into a clock. And that's just a piece of content automation where you're making design decisions. And of course, if you wanted in your own company's brand for clocks, let's imagine you're a Swiss clockmaker, you want to use different clocks on every page, you'd need to get someone to design that to fit your brand. But these bits of content design can be very powerful, and they can lift a document from being just dull presentation of data as words, or very expensive, where a designer's had to take every single one of those 200 Excel charts and turn them into properly branded charts. These can be done really quickly. So we're going to wrap up in a moment, but I want to talk about the process of content design for business users. So content is increasingly important. Content is king. And actually, it's not just the initial creation of content, it's the entire content cycle. When you've got to go back and revise a document, and redo it or redo it for the new brand, but the same text, that's when separating your database, which contains all the text, from your design decisions becomes so powerful. So managing content, doing it once, is a job, but okay, you're being paid for it, you've done it once. When you come back 3 years later and you've got to do it all again, you discover that you're starting from scratch again, unless you've got it already separated out, and you can separate your content from your design and then press a button, combines them again. Maybe you can do a brand refresh or something, but it's there. So here's the process. The first thing is for any kind of design, the base of any design, whether it be designing a building, designing a car, or designing a leaflet, is decide what you want to achieve. I've got to say that of all the design projects I've ever been involved in, advertising, marketing, public relations, branding, every single one that's ever gone wrong has been primarily wrong because the people who asked for it didn't know what they wanted. And then you get the requirements keep changing and you never keep up with them. I've seen, wasn't involved with it, but I've seen a multi-billion-dollar IT project had to be cancelled because the people running it just kept on asking for more things it was supposed to do. And the people who were going to get it kept on thinking of more things they wanted, and it just spiraled and spiraled and spiraled. It was never going to be finished. So decide what you want to do. And then the next step, so the top line is the creative process. And the bottom line here is the data process. So that the next thing is go to your data guys and say, we want to reach these kinds of people. What do you know about them? And the data guys know all kinds of things about them, which will inform your design. I once did a major project on cervical screening. And I began with general kind of notions about, as a man, what do I know about cervical screening? But the people who commissioned this work for me, which was a cancer intelligence unit, not only knew in general what the issues were, but they knew the names and addresses and medical history of every single person involved. Now, I could not look at that. That is hugely confidential medical data. And often you can't, but they can answer your question. So you go from there, using their expertise to constructing the publication. Don't try to work with the data before you've designed the publication, whether it's a brochure or a catalog or a manual or whatever. And then you design that, the way I explained, by designing it as a sample. And then you come back to the data people and tell them to design the data model. Now, you may think, what the heck is a data model? You don't need to know. What you need to know is they know. And if you use the word data model, they will love you because that sounds like one of their things. So get them to design the data model, which can deliver what you're asking for. And once you've done that, you've got your design of the publication, you've got your data provided to you, ask for a sample, and then execute it. And this is kind of scary. It's also kind of exciting because you press a button and your document is populated with perhaps thousands of pages. Go and make a cup of coffee or even have lunch while it's doing thousands of pages, because QuarkXPress is fast, but nothing is so fast that it can do thousands of pages instantly. And then check it. This is, again, it's an important part. The data guys have got to check it. You've got to check it, because everything which is not checked will be wrong. And then finally, you deliver it. And you can use a simple model or other models. The data guys may have their own models. But working with people who control the IT systems, the information technology systems, and the designer creates power which neither of you otherwise have. So someone's producing content, someone's producing data, you're producing design. The combination of the three for business can lead to dramatically increased profitability. Well, let me go back to Bunny at this point and go on to any questions.
Hey there. The questions we've gotten thus far, some folks missed your webinar last week, so I just want to direct them to the YouTube channel, QuarkXPress TV. There's a link to that directly from quark.com in the footer. So you can catch up on last week's webinar. And of course, today's and next week's will also be published just a few days after, after delivery. So check back for those. At this point, I am, opening the floor to see if anyone has any specific questions about what we've covered today. please feel free to raise your hand or put the question in the chat. In the meantime, Martin, while we're waiting on that, was there anything else you thought about bringing into today's discussion, but perhaps you didn't, that you want to just touch on briefly?
I really wanted to talk about the image grid. I haven't got an illustration for it because this is an incredibly powerful way of populating a document with images from a folder. I will pick it up next week, but it's just one of those things that got built into Quark a few years ago. And once you discover it, you're like, wow, where has this been all my life? If you're a business user and you're not really a designer, there was a couple of things I wanted to say, which I felt we wouldn't have time for. But getting someone to set Quark up for you at the beginning is really powerful. So, for example, Quark defaults to Helvetica 12 point. Now, David Ogilvy of Ogilvy and Mather did research on font sizes and found that 11 points is the most legible. Helvetica is a great font, but it's a bit boring these days. And you may be wondering, why does it always go to that? If you open up QuarkXPress and don't open a document, and then go to edit styles, and then just change on the normal character style, that Helvetica 12 point, to whatever your corporate font is, at whatever size you use, I'd recommend 11 point as a starter, then that will be persistent in QuarkXPress every time you open it, unless you delete the preferences, which you might have to do if there's a problem. And the same is true. You can import your colors, your corporate colors. You can set your item styles. Anything which you set in QuarkXPress with no document open will then be persistent for all of QuarkXPress. So for every new document you open, it won't affect existing documents, but every new document you create, it will then come in with your fonts. Maybe if you've got a set of paragraph and item styles and character styles and even conditional styles, they will all be there ready. So for business users where you're doing the same kind of document again and again and again, it can be really helpful. And if you haven't got someone to set it up for you, it's not that difficult, but it's often easier if you just get a designer to come in and spend a half day with you setting these things up. There's a lot of stuff in the preferences, which will just make life much easier for you.
Great. So next question, Martin, they want to know if you're going to write another book on the newer versions of Quark. So perhaps we should talk about that.
Well, maybe we should. I've got to say, I wrote the original book because I had a huge client that I love very much that said, we're absolutely, definitely going to get our content to you by the 1st of March. But I worked with them for about 3 years, and I knew that this content was not going to reach me until later. And so I actually took the month of March to write the book while waiting for this content to arrive. And in the end, it arrived, I think, on the 28th of March, as the book was being finished. And I did the job. And actually, I'd learned so much by writing the book that I did the job in half the time, which was great for both of us. But right now, I'm the director of a charity in Belgium, and it kind of takes up all my time. So I would love to write another book. Maybe I'd love to write another book with somebody else. I would love to write a book about QuarkXPress for InDesign users. But I gave up on InDesign 5 years ago. I worked out that I spent more on the subscription for that particular company over 5 years than all of my other software put together, and I was having no more of it. So I couldn't possibly write that book on my own. But if there's somebody very knowledgeable about this who wants to write a book with me and is willing to do that, I would be excited to do that, and maybe Quark could be willing to help us really make that happen. Bonnie, back to you.
Okay, well, that's a great call to action. If there's anybody on the webinar today who would potentially like to partner with you on that, feel free to reach out to me, and we can pass that along. Let's see, next question. How can content design help in transcribing Word documents and importing to QuarkXPress as italics, bold, etc.?
Okay, this is the thing that we come up with quite a lot. So when you import Word into Quark, you can ask it to honor the styles or not, and there's various other things it can do. Now, you can pull all of the word formatting into QuarkXPress. That's not a problem. So just on the import, go to the options. But when I do this, I usually end up having to do it 4 times because Word is not a structural program when it comes to typography. And so what you quite often find is that the person sending you this document has been actually quite random in the way they do it. So what I'll often do is pull it in with all of its style sheets and look at its style sheets and what's on there. And then maybe go back to the Word document and look again and try to understand their structure. And sometimes they just use titles and headers randomly. Other people use them quite well. So if you want to get this really right, I would begin by doing what I said with the express tags, but actually for Word. So create your style sheets you want to use and export those, save text as Word with styles, and then give the person that as a template. So you've got to turn it as a template into Word. If they then just use your styles, including character styles, which are now I think in Word, then when you import it back into QuarkXPress, it will come back perfectly, especially if you've explained to them why it's important to be consistent about what you call them. Now, to help users of that, I don't call things heading, subheader, subtitle, third subtitle. I will just call it title 0, title 1, title 2, title 3, title 4, title 5, title 6. And if it's any kind of complicated documents, and the clients I just told you about, who I still love them, I don't work with them anymore, there was like 8 different levels of different kinds of titles in their documents. If you explain to them their structure, point it out to them and ask them to stick to it, you will save yourself a great deal of grief. So Quark can import all of Word's formatting. That's one of the options, but it's going to work much better if you create your style sheets, export them as Word, give them to the client, get them to use your style sheets and no others, and then import it back in, and it will all come back in actually as if it was X tags or express tags. And that actually also works with footnotes as well. So if you want to do footnotes, you need to do that particular workflow.
Okay, great. So Martin, another question. Do you know if Applescript will be alive for coming years to do automation in QuarkXPress?
I'm afraid I don't. My contact at Apple is a crazy lady who programs Apple Logic, and she's an extraordinary person, but I don't think I've got any insights about Applescript. QuarkXPress now also offers JavaScript, and I mean, personally, I do use Apple's automation features. They're very useful. Again, they're one of the unsung parts of Apple. I don't know of any plans to get rid of Applescript. There was a time when Apple said we're getting rid of it, and it was actually Quark users who rescued it because it was so ubiquitous in QuarkXPress. The other problem about Applescript is it's only on Macs, and then when a PC user joins your office and you want to add another Quark license and get them using it, and they say, well, none of these scripts work. So I would say if you're programming now, it's worth investing some learning in the JavaScripts. And I think all of the supplied Apple scripts of Quark are also now supplied as Quark JavaScripts. I am not a JavaScript programmer. I did have a bit of a go when it came out just to write the book about it and to see how it works. And it's exciting. It's another level of automation beyond the ones I've been talking about. But you can do very powerful things in this way. But Applescript, Apple has not said they're getting rid of it. It appears to be here to stay, but there's lots of things in the computing world that appear to be here to stay and then suddenly weren't. JavaScript is here to stay.
Okay, great. So we have reached our 40-minute mark. We're doing these 40-minute webinars in honor of our 40th anniversary. So again, I want to thank everyone for joining today. Thank you, Martin, and we look forward to seeing you guys back here next week, same time, for tips and tricks all about QuarkXPress. Some ins and outs. As a longtime user, Martin knows a lot of the secrets and is willing to share those. And so we do encourage you to come and to bring your questions. Thanks, everyone, and we will see you next week.